And they're like, well, we're just going to handle it. Don't worry about it. And I was like, I'm going to worry about it. And I'm going to need the number of the trucker.
Right.
Yes. And so I got
and
the
Dog the bounty hunter.
Yes.
Right?
And I was like,
All right. Welcome to the You Can't Make This Shit Up podcast, where we bring in leaders from all over our community to talk about leadership, success, failure, but most importantly, lessons learned. And we do that by telling stories. I think everyone likes stories, but we do it with You Can't Make This Shit Up stories. So imagine, if you're sitting at home, do an audit of your life right now and write down one or two You Can't Make This Shit Up stories. Those are the ones that we're going to talk about. So if that's interesting to you, come along for the ride. It's going to be a fun conversation. Before we get started, I'd like to do a little introduction. My name is Josh Roberts. I'm going to hand the baton off to my co-host here, Tim Tannert, to introduce our special guest today.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. So I have the honor of introducing Pallavi Golla. Pallavi is a close friend of mine. She's an unbelievable entrepreneur, leader, and it's just an honor and privilege to have you with us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
thanks for having me. This is fun.
Awesome. So why don't we just get started by sharing a little bit about yourself and some stories that got you to where you are.
Yeah, those stories will make a little bit more sense if I give you some background about me. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, went to school in New York and spent a couple years on Wall Street working in the hedge fund world. That in itself has a ton of stories. Worked in both New York and LA during 2008 time. One of my stories will come from that time. Worked a little bit in investment banking, but really for the last 15 years, I've been an entrepreneur. Started my first company in California. It was within the wine industry, and sold that to my biggest competitor, worked for them for a little bit, moved back home to Pittsburgh to raise my family, and started an apparel brand in 2015. We made, bamboo clothing. It was almost like dry fit textile made of cotton and bamboo. Moved from kids to women's to men's clothing over 7 years, built a multi-million-dollar business during COVID, supply chain issues. That's when another one of my stories is going to come in, and really bootstrap that business. I sold that business in 2022. And now Tim and I work, in very similar capacity as EOS implementers here in Pittsburgh. So the third part of my entrepreneurial journey has recently started within the last year.
That's just awesome. And, so many people dream about having one successful exit of a business. And the fact that you've been able to put together two in two very different industries is just really remarkable. And it shows the skill and talent and creativity that you bring to the table. So again, thank you for joining us. We can't wait to dive into these.
It's been a wild ride, as I'm sure you both know. Yeah. It always is.
Even this morning, I think you said coming in, you're like, You Can't Make This Shit Up story.
Oh, exactly. Tim and I are putting on an event, right? And the phone is blowing up. So, it's always a pull over and take care of shit kind of situation.
That's awesome. So where would you like to start with your stories? And I'm kind of thinking like Wolf of Wall Street is what I'm hearing from the hedge fund days. And
yeah, I would probably start with like a couple stories before I became a leader, I think, because it shows kind of what an effective leader is, and perhaps someone above me that was not an effective leader can't make the shit up story. So
that's perfect.
The first is, I was, one of my first 2 or 3 years working on Wall Street. I worked for a global special situations fund in 2008. I graduated early in 2005. I was working for a mentor of mine who I'd worked through all through college. It was a unique opportunity to really be ground level on this kind of $300 million, which is small in that world, hedge fund where they were doing really incredible things. We had the opportunity to get on the ground floor while the markets were riding high, 2005, 2006, 2007. Some of the smartest people I ever interacted with. We ended up having some great investments in Asia, in Europe, all during this time when like solar was exploding and, semiconductors were doing a lot of interesting things. And we were looking at specific vendors that were really pushing the limits. We also shorted MBS right before the crisis. So a lot of great things. At the same time, when you're doing some really esoteric work like that, you're in a lot of illiquid investments. And so whenever 2008 came, although we had great returns for our clients, when shit hits the fan, and the markets go down, when you have institutional investors, they're looking to get out, right? And restructure and pull out and pull to cash. And there's a whole waterfall structure of what needs to happen regardless of what your performance is. But to be frank, everyone had shitty performance because the markets were going down, right? And so we were getting capital calls from investors to, return cash. They should have known that we were in really illiquid investments. And so as the most junior person on that team, what does that entail? Well, it entails, pretty much 3 to 4 weeks of working during the day. And then from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., so Asian market hours, staying on the phone, talking to trading desks, and trying to find anyone in this crazy, crashing, downturn in the market who is going to buy these positions so we can liquidate and get these investors their capital back. And so I remember very vividly, I'd go to work in the morning, I'd kind of do my job half-ass, whatever we needed to do. But my real job is staying on the phone and trying to liquidate small chunks of this Taiwanese semiconductor company. And, these are middle market Asian equities. So it was totally crazy. But, what I thought was the leadership lesson from that was, yes, my work ethic. I learned a lot about work ethic and getting the job done and trying to fulfill your promises, transparency with our investors from the beginning, right? They knew what type of fund we were. And while we were trying our best, we could not fulfill their promises. Well, it was a promise we couldn't keep and that we weren't obligated to keep, but we were trying our best. And then on the mentor and leadership side, I was doing a lot of grunt work. That was my job, understanding my position on what EOS would call the accountability chart, but also, the empathy and understanding from the people above me. They were leading the charge and they were holding my hand and they were saying, I would come in every morning with an update on what could or couldn't be done. And, they were very calm. They were very pragmatic. They were very logical about the next steps in a really shitty situation for pretty much everyone. And I think that was a huge learning for me on how to lead and how to lead someone who is working a lot and stressed and doesn't know what to do. And I've definitely taken those lessons along with me. On the flip side, some bad leadership within that context of those early days. Joined a new fund after the markets crashed. I joined a distressed credit fund. So all this debt had kind of, deteriorated. This fund that I was working for in Los Angeles and New York, they had 2 offices, was buying that debt in an attempt to take it over, right? Working with management teams, really taking kind of activist positions in funds. We invested in this company. I think I can say it now. I don't even know if it exists anymore. It's called Panavision. So they make cameras. They made cameras for the whole movie industry. And right. So we're analyzing this company. We're like, yeah, even though their debt is really shitty now and maybe they can't make a debt payment, Panavision apparently is this company that will never go out of business because it's not like technology would change the movie industry or anything. And so that was the thesis on which our whole team made that investment, right? And then we slowly realized all of their inventory, all of their technology was being completely overthrown by CGI, everything within the industry, right? The status of 4K and cameras and how movies were being made was changing drastically. And so it really ended up going into default with very little, what we thought was underlying, resources for that debt ends up being worth nothing. And I would say that the leader in charge, yes, it was my investment idea. I was proposing investments at the time, but it was also the buy-in from the portfolio managers that I worked for. And when that went south, I mean, you just saw all of humanity devolve, right? Because we worked in a competitive industry. It was going to affect fund return. And even though most of my performance was great, yeah, that's a fuck up, And while people mess up in their positions, what I didn't appreciate from the leadership in that fund was like I was screamed at. I was, blamed, right? There was no accountability on the part of the leadership to understand and say, yes, I took accountability. I said right off the bat, I said, this was the wrong move. We made a mistake. I also kind of, said this was a team decision at the end of the day, but they didn't see it or one person on the team didn't see it that way. And it almost came off as very childish, like just the lack of leadership, the lack of accountability from someone that was above me. And I think that was a lesson I took away from that as I moved on and became a leader, in the positions that I held going forward.
Organizations have investment committees for a reason, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's never one person making that decision.
Yeah.
And so as looking back at that, if that would be replayed, if we could rewind, right, and articulate a better scenario, a better outcome from that leadership, what does that look like from your perspective?
Definitely no yelling and screaming, because I think that's just a lack of respect. And I would never do that to someone, even though I was internally frustrated. And I think, everyone has to take accountability for their actions, whether you're the lowest person in your org chart or accountability chart, or you're at the highest level. I actually think at the highest level, you're responsible for your team's decisions, right? And you bear the weight of that, even though they may have done something wrong. And I think that would have been the better solution, to talk through it, lessons learned, how does this not happen again, right? Mentoring folks through that instead of pointing a finger, yelling at them in a closed door office. Yeah,
absolutely. So attack the problem, not the person.
Exactly. Right? Solution focused. And I've always built, every single company and team being solutions focused.
So it's a good contrast between the first example and the second example. What was your emotional state at this time? Because
I'm a firecracker too, to be honest. And that's something I've learned to temper over time, I think. And so unfortunately, I wasn't very proud of my behavior in that scenario too, because if someone's yelling at me and you kind of feel defensive, I yelled right back. And there was one person above both of us and they had to get involved. It's an embarrassing moment, to be honest. I wasn't proud of my behavior. I felt a little pushed back against the wall, but I still think, what I teach my kids, no matter how someone is treating you, you don't want to embody their behavior. You have to rise above. But
were you, obviously in the moment, very reactive?
Very reactive and very stressed.
I just imagine you go home at night and this whole situation's happened. And how was that making you feel?
Yeah. I think definitely stressed during both situations equally. But I think when you have a leader that is guiding you through a storm, like in the first situation, even though you're stressed, those are all natural emotions. Everyone is stressed in that situation. You almost feel like it's going to be okay. There is a mutual trust there that ignites you. It makes you want to work harder. It makes you want to push through, right? Versus the other situation where you're like, I'm scared. I'm actually scared to propose the next investment because it has to be right. It is and I think this is that leadership thought process of risk taking, allowing your people to take risk, right? What you're doing in the second scenario is creating an environment where people are not willing to take bets.
It's funny, you talked about the yelling devolving, right? And yelling causes more yelling.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a situation once, very heated conversation. Someone started screaming at me. I did the same thing. And I was wearing an Apple Watch at the time. I normally don't, but I did that day. And all of a sudden, my watch started going off. And I looked down, and it was a high heart rate alert on my watch. And that was enough to kind of pause me and go like, this is really stupid, right? And kind of calm back down.
Well,
but
if you don't have an Apple Watch,
are
there other signals
Exactly.
that you can recognize early to try to, because like you said, and even the response, right? Like sometimes we lose control of that. But there are signs and there are signals that we can pay attention to. What are there some of those that you think about? Because I'm sure that's the only time.
The only time that I've ever been emotional. Yeah. Just ask my wife, or don't ask my wife. But yeah, I think one, calling a timeout, like pausing. Because yes, we are going to have emotions. We're going to get frustrated. We're going to respond. But the more that we can put space in, and another thing that we teach is what we call a 2 emotion exercise, where when you start to feel that ramp up, to call it out and say, you know what, I'm feeling some emotions right now. I'm sure you are too. Let's put a name to those. And, right now I'm frustrated and angry. And how are you feeling, right? And allowing them to respond as well. And often once we call it out, we can take ownership and control of that feeling because we're recognizing it. Like my Apple Watch allowed me to kind of separate from my body for a second and go, you know what, this is stupid. When you call it out, you get the same thing. And so that's another tool that you can use in your leadership journey in communicating, working with your teams to kind of temper
and then
these
having
situations.
people around you also that have the ability to recognize it and call it out too, right? Because it's not always just 2 people, right? And so if you can teach your leadership team this same concept, likely they're going to be the one to hit the timeout, right? So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yep. But all going to attack the problem, not the person, right? We're all going to battle problems throughout every day of our lives. And so how do we best approach that with the team?
Have you run into this person since?
No, but in looking back on it, obviously everything goes beyond work. You have things going on at home. He had a very complicated life in general, to be honest. I think he was going through a divorce. He was moving coasts away from his family. And I think what I've learned over time is everyone has their own story. The more you can actually understand people and understand their story, the more you can understand where they're coming from. And so as I've built teams and led people and, tried to build cohesive organizations, I guess, one thing I've learned is we don't all have to be the same, but we do have to understand each other. We also don't need to be best friends, but the understanding of where someone's coming from and how it may be different than you can absolutely make you a better leader.
Absolutely.
I think that's how do you think your family or your personal life has influenced your entrepreneurial journey, and with that in mind, right? Because it's not just I have this business, but you also have these other things going on in life at different times that maybe have an impact. So what's that been like for you?
I think it's impossible to separate your personal life from your work life. And I think that understanding both within the work I'm doing and the people that are working with you or for you is imperative. We cannot expect people to put a Ziploc bag on the top of their personal life and walk into work. And I experience that daily, and it's a struggle for me. The kids I built a business during COVID where I had 2 kids that were in and out of school, and I was building a business and. There is, especially with remote work, especially with everything, how the workforce has changed, we're blurring those lines even more. And I think it's imperative for leaders yes, I'm going to be a walking EOS, commercial right now, but it's imperative to create those lines, to create more clarity, to help your employees understand this is what's expected of them, knowing that your organization works when everyone has the same set of expectations.
Yeah, we said the work-life balance, but I have a good friend, Tracy Zimmerman, who calls it the work-life integration, and I think that's a better way to describe it, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's I don't know that it's ever necessarily a balance, right? But you do kind of integrate those into life, and
unfortunately or unfortunately, I think one thing I have to work on is my kids know when I'm stressed about things that are beyond them, right? And I'm stressed about work, or I'm stressed about an email, or they can tell that my mood has changed, and on the flip side, I almost use family time as a catalyst to mellow out my mood, in other ways. And so they're a tool for me. Do you meditate
too, or
I wish I did. I have a lot of self-improvement to do, but I'm not there yet.
With that whole stoicism philosophy, right, of controlling what you can control and having the serenity to accept what you can't, right? And knowing, put another way, I love the phrase, you can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And so just approaching life with that, you know what, there's things out of my control that I cannot control right now, and that's okay. But I can control how I respond to it, and I can control what sets me up for success. And, you know, the whole work-life integration, we were talking before we got started here. My daughter's in high school tryouts for soccer, and I wanted to see some of it. And so yesterday I sat in the parking lot of her soccer tryout and took work calls all morning watching her while I did it. And so
what happens if she scores right in the middle of or stops?
Or makes a great,
she's a goalie,
she's a
right?
goalkeeper.
Save.
She did, and I always do the quiet fist pump, right? And try to focus on the client conversation I'm having. But, you know, how do you know, coming up with creative ways to be able to do both, because our pressure on ourselves to be perfect. So much of, you know, we're high performers, we're A-type personalities. We want to be perfect. And we want to be perfect in work. We want to be perfect as a spouse. We want to be perfect as a parent. We want to be perfect in every aspect of our lives. That makes it so we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah.
Right.
Because no one's perfect. And things do have to integrate. And so being able to say, well, I could sit there in a car, right, and still see her and still experience that and be able to talk to her about what I saw afterwards. Hey, that was a great save, or I loved your distribution here, or whatever that looks like, while still meeting my client needs, while still being able to help other people the way I do every day. And so, you know, are there any tips or any ways that you've been able to successfully kind of navigate that challenge?
Yeah, I would say, you know, I'm always looking for tips on how to stay present. I'm either present at work, right, or I'm present at home. And I learned this tip many years ago. You pull into your garage, right? You're about to jump from one world to the other, especially in the world where when my children were smaller, totally different, right? Just take 3 deep breaths and tell yourself, like, it's time to shut off, right? It's like almost like a switch, but you give yourself 30 seconds in the car to kind of change gears so you can show up for the people that are inside that door the way that you need to. And then vice versa, giving yourself time at the beginning of the day. And so waking up early, giving yourself time, you know, it's a crucial time for me. Tim gets a lot of early emails from me, but you know, it's a crucial time for me to feel like I'm productive in the beginning of the day. And so that means whether I'm working out or writing emails before those kids get up, you know, setting yourself up and creating that space for that time in your life.
That's great advice. I know one of the biggest mistakes I make is as I'm driving home, you know, and I typically like to use that time to make phone calls, right? So I'll be on the phone. It'll go longer than I expect, and I pull into the driveway, and I'm still on the phone, and my daughter comes running out to the car, and I'm just like, this is like my nightmare scenario, right? Because I have to either tell her to hold on just a second, or I have to make like an abrupt call, and that's just the worst, you know. So I'll sometimes just drive around my neighborhood, until I can end the call, and then make the transition. But I need to do a better job of.
It's a hard transition.
Of really making that transition between those two moments, right?
Absolutely.
That is a special time whenever, especially if,
So on this topic, right, there's a unbelievable performer, speaker, leadership coach. His name's Michael Lesso. And I actually hired him to speak at a conference for a company I was CEO of in the past. But he was, I think, in the Pink Panther movies. He was a famous actor, became speaking coach, and then ultimately a leadership coach. And the way he frames this is Act 1 and Act 2, as if you were in a play. You know, your Act 1 is your work. And he talks about the fact that you are always on stage as a leader. You know, you could come into the office back when we had offices, right? Come into the office in the morning and maybe you just got in a fight with your spouse, or you have something going on, right, in your personal life. The way you present yourself when you walk into the office, people automatically think it's about them. So they're going to perceive, the company's not doing well. Or, do I need to start looking for another job, or does the boss hate me? Or they start spinning a story in their minds about themselves, regardless of what's actually triggering your posture or your presence. And it's the same thing then when you get into your personal life. Often after working all day, we fall into a habit of coming home and just crashing. And he talks about, no, you can't do that. That's act 2.
Especially after you eat.
Right? Exactly.
Really crashing.
That's act 2. And your kids have been waiting for you all day.
Yeah.
Right. And they, your spouse has been waiting for you, and whatever that looks like for you and your family, you have to be back on stage. And so I love that mental thought every day of, okay, I'm on stage as a leader, leading my family, leading my company. How do I, show up? And so watch some of his videos.
Yeah.
He does some amazing stuff. He's written a book, a really interesting guy.
Yeah, I like you can incorporate those too, where you go off stage, you take the 3 breaths, and then you start the next one.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
It's a reset button. Yeah,
sometimes
like
you need
almost
that pause.
pushing yourself into the next phase, right? Yeah, giving yourself
Like
a
let
moment.
the curtains close.
Yes.
To open
Listen
back
to your
up.
favorite podcast, this one on the way home.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Reset.
That's awesome.
One of the things we were talking about, difficult situations. You can't make this. Sometimes it's good also as leaders when we're in those situations to make fun of ourselves or to use, humor. Have there been any humorous examples of these, crazy stories where you've been able to, or looking back, I guess it could be just a funny situation, but does humor play into it at all for you?
I mean, I
life?
think for me, I'm a pretty lighthearted person in general.
Or at least I try to sometimes, like in those situations to break the ice. If it's, we said we have a timeout option, but also I think sometimes just using humor or making fun of ourselves or
Levity,
the situation in general can also help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Break the ice a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think even just when you look back on it, right? Like it's intense moments, kind of when you do the recap being like, well, we can't have that happen again, kind of, bringing
in
levity
the
to
moment
the
it's not
team,
fun.
for
But
sure.
looking back, it can be
exactly.
a lot of times, right?
That really sucked. Let's not do that again.
Let's definitely not do that again. Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. And so that was early in your career. Now,
Yeah.
as you've kind of transitioned, you started 2 amazing businesses in the wine and in the clothing industry, successful exits. I'm sure everything was smooth, no problems through any of that, correct?
No problems. It was like, I woke up every day, the birds were chirping,
I imagine that the wine piece was, caused by the first part, right? You just had to drink a lot of wine, and so then you transition into the wine.
Exactly.
How much of your inventory did you consume?
Exactly. Well, that was pre-kids too. So,
there you go.
I moved sequentially through life in my different phases of business based on what I had going on. Well, the one story that I wanted to share, you can't make this shit up, was related to the apparel brand, bootstrapped that brand, working with manufacturers in Asia during COVID, supply chain issues. Oh, wow. And I think a lot of the, leadership quality, or I guess a prime example of leadership and what I may have learned or tried not to embody along the way is embodied in the story. So funny story, entertaining, hopefully. We pre-sold a lot of our inventory, right? Your bootstrapping inventory is a huge cost. To give you an idea of how my company ran, I was not responsible for our inventory or paying for it until it hit our warehouse. So our manufacturer from Asia kind of created the supply chain for us, which was very helpful because they had a lot of power within the logistics firms, and I, as a smaller brand, would not have as much power. And so thankfully through most of COVID, we had very smooth supply chains. We never missed a shipment. There was never any delays with boats coming across or customs, which, port issues, which had impacted a lot of people. And so that made us, it put us in a very favorable position. Although in 2021, we're pre-selling every collection, trying to build up some cash so we can pay when that delivery hits our warehouse. did the same thing. So we have a fall collection that's supposed to land October 5th. We pre-sell it in, August and September. We probably pre-sold maybe $100,000 worth of inventory. And it was $100,000 worth of product that was coming in, right? So $400,000 worth of sales we could put towards that inventory. So sell it August and September, tell our customers. I'm very big on transparency. I mean, I built my whole brand because we had a great product, we were honest, and we delivered, right? Literally and figuratively.
You talked about transparency earlier, so I think that's a common thing that you picked up from the mentorship.
Yeah, I think transparency with your customers, transparency with your employees, that's a big thing that EOS talks about, right? And we teach our clients, be transparent and be honest. And that will get you a lot further than trying to be someone that you're not or have imposter syndrome and puff your chest. So delivery is going to hit October 5th. We're going to start shipping October 15th. Every single page of our website's like October 15th, October 15th, October 15th. That's what your email says when you pre-ordered. So the shipment lands in LA, right? September 15th. I see it go through customs. We have someone on our team that's like kind of tracking it, giving me updates. It gets on a truck in LA. Great. Everything's going smoothly. Again, this is awesome. And the tracking is coming along. It's going through Kansas. It's on a truck. It's a truckload that's coming along. And then September 25th, no update. So you wait a couple days, maybe something happened. It's like your, UPS delivery, something weird happened. No update. 26th, 27th, 28th. Then I start calling, the people that I know, the logistics company, the trucking company. They're giving me some weird answers. They're like, we're going to look on the, no, we're going to take it. Don't worry, it's going to be there October 5th. No, we have a lot of time. I was like, we do have some time. That's fair. October 1st, no update on the tracking of that truck. And then I was like, I'm going to need to know what's going on. This is really strange, and we've never had this happen before. And they were like, well, frankly speaking, the truck has been hijacked.
Pirates?
The truck has been hijacked by the driver. He is not
Kansas.
telling.
We're in Kansas now.
That's where the tracking said, but they have, I guess, in the trucks, like some kind of, navigation thing, and he had shut that off. So he just went dark. That's what happened. And this driver, they weren't sure where he was. They were trying to communicate with him. There was a trucking, I think, driver shortage at the time. I'm pretty sure this driver does not speak English. I'm pretty sure he speaks Mandarin. And they don't know where he is, and they're trying to communicate with him. All they know is that he is holding the truckload hostage and demanding payment, or that he'll take the truckload. I'm not really sure what he's doing with $100,000 worth of, I don't know, bamboo apparel, but I don't know if he even knows what's in the back of his truck. But I was like, I don't really care. To me, it's about delivering on your word and your promise to customers. That, to be frank, it was just a weird time in the world, and I like to be a source of trust, right? Everything's going wrong. Nothing's going the right way for so many families, for so many parents. And I kind of put that pressure on myself. I know they're just baby clothes, or kids' clothes or adult clothes, but I liked fulfilling my promise in a world where things were just not going right for so many people. And so, it's kind of being solutions focused. I found out this information. I talked to this trucking company, and I said, what are you going to do about it? What is your plan? What do you do in this scenario? And they're like, well, we're just going to handle it. Don't worry about it. And I was like, I'm going to worry about it. And I'm going to need the number of the trucker.
Right.
Yes.
And so I got
and
the number.
Dog the bounty hunter.
Yes.
Right?
And I was like, any information you have, I'm going to call you every hour. I'm assuming that you're going to work on this for every moment of the next couple days, and so will I. So what I'd like from you is the number of the trucker, and I will be calling you every hour to get an update from you if you hear from him, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to interact with him. Mm-hmm. I ended up calling the trucker, and I actually ended up just trying to be empathetic with him. I said, I have a small business. there's so many customers of mine that are, relying on getting these products. I have a small business and I'll go out, I just went down the whole rabbit hole. I was like, I don't know if you understand me. Let me just be very clear. I'm just trying to make a living. I know you are too. Let's talk. And if I need to meet you somewhere to get this inventory or hand it off, let's figure it out. And at that point, he had called me back very broken English. He said, I haven't gotten paid. And I said, okay. I said, when were you expecting to get paid? He's like, I need to get paid now. He just kept saying, I need to get paid now. And I was understanding there was a huge miscommunication in terms of what his expectation was, potentially what he was told by this third-party trucking company. And that was infringing on his actions, which ultimately affected me and my customers. So it's October 5th, 6th. I mean, this is going on for a week or so at a time. The trucking company is just blowing me off. I finally figured out that he was in Reading. Like he told me he was in Reading, PA. Wow. And I was like, can I come meet you? And I was like, how much do you need? And we'll figure it out. And so he gave me an amount. I mean, it was like $1,000. And
I'm on the way.
Yeah. And I said, I can come meet you. I live in Pittsburgh. Because I said, give me your address right now. And I called the manufacturer. And I was like, I was kind of in touch with them, but I was like, listen, this is the situation because they're in Asia. They don't really know. There's a few different parties that are involved at this point. And I said, I'm going to pay this guy $1,000. You're going to reimburse me for this $1,000. And I don't know what's going on, but I want you to know never to use this trucking company again because it's still their inventory. I don't have to pay for anything. If that shipment gets lost, other than my integrity, our brand, our promise, there's no financial deficit to us. Sure, we're returning that money to our customers, but we didn't pay for it. And so, all hands on deck. Everyone's like, what is going on with the truck? I ended up doing an Instagram story like every day about the trucker situation. And people were just watching because at that point, our shipment's late. We know we're not going to deliver product. I was like, sent the first couple emails to our customers being like, sorry, there's a delay, supply chain issues, COVID. And at the end, I was like, our truck has been pirated. Yeah. And everyone was, people are in my stories, in my DMs, and it created more empathy. And I think maybe the takeaway is, long story short, I told him to drive to Pittsburgh. I said, I will give you $1,000. I was like, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I think that, you need to get paid. I'll pay you. I just said I'd pay you. Came with the truck to our warehouse. We unloaded the whole thing. And I think what's my lesson? Trust your gut and listen. I guess it comes back to the same thing. Everyone has a story, right? You have to figure out what the story is and then come up with a solution. It's never, there's very little black and white. I tell my kids all the time, there's very little black and white in the world. Right. Bad guys and good guys. There's a lot of gray. Right. Your goal is to figure out the gray.
One of our friends has a tagline in his email that says, get curious.
Yeah.
Right. And that's basically what you're talking about. Get curious, ask the questions, find common ground, don't assume. Mm-hmm. And so I love
empathy
that
as well. Absolutely. Like that, if you call the driver and you don't have empathy and you're, back, yelling or whatever, that's not gonna, you're gonna get a hang up and never hear from them again, right? I think the empathy was huge. The transparency on the customer side, also huge. And then they're almost pulling for you, right? They're in the story with you.
Oh yeah.
They're curious on how this is gonna turn out, and not probably gonna be as difficult on the back end if it ends up being a few days later, whatever the case may be. And then I think tenacity. We've talked a little bit before, and I'm picking up on the tenacity that you have on just, diving in and really, solving the problem yourself, right?
Yeah.
And not relying on anyone else to do it for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great trade.
And I think I think I told Josh when we were talking about this a little earlier, but this is when it comes into play, having great partners, right? Mm-hmm. You build this relationship. You kind of push and pull when you're in these situations, maybe as a leader, as a business owner, you're dealing with a lot of different vendors and customers, and it's always a constant push and pull. You have to let some things go in order to, kind of drive in when it's necessary. And I think that goes for employees too, right? You show empathy and understanding, and then it gives you the ability to show when it really matters, right? Like when shit hits the fan, when you need something out of someone, when someone drops the ball, you've built this, I don't know, glass full of rapport that it's not like you're screaming every second or mad every second, but when you are serious, when you need that extra level of accountability, when things are not going well, I think you're building kind of this reservoir of trust and respect. So when you do have to hit that button, which I did with my manufacturer at that point in time, it's not like I'm always a pain in the ass to them, but I'm going to be a pain in the ass now because it matters.
I love this topic. I think I'm putting a lot of thought into it. We obviously had a conversation and it triggered it, and I'm hopefully going to write about it at some point. But it's this, when we get new customers, right, and then making this transition into this partnership, right, and what are the things that have to happen to make that transition to a true partnership? Can you do it early on? What's the time period for that? Trust obviously is a big thing, this rapport and just building that up. What are the things that you can do? And then what does it look like? How do you know the difference between a customer and a true partner? Sometimes I think we throw around the word partnership when it's really not a partnership, right? Because when things go bad, they're not trying to help you solve the problem. They're trying to make it worse, or they're blaming you, or whatever the case may be, versus the true partner. Like, you're in it together. You're sharing resources. You've got there's no red tape, right? And
you're creating win-win scenarios, right?
And accountability, right? And so I think there was accountability on both sides throughout that partnership as well with my manufacturer. We would make a mistake in saying something, and that affected the product, and we took ownership on that. Other times they made a mistake. They ate that cost. They fixed it. Again, it's a push and pull of knowing when to put your foot down and say, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. But you got to let some things fall through the cracks in order to, you can't micromanage and push on everything, And
that transparency, I think, is huge, right? Yeah. Especially when things are bad. I think those are some of the moments that help build that partnership, right? Absolutely. Because if you hide it versus if you're transparent, like, here, I'm going through this issue, we screwed up or you screwed up, but like, open up here's everything that's going on. Let's try to solve it together. You come out on the other side. I think that's where the partnerships really start to happen. It's just like in life, most of the time, not in the good times, but in the bad times.
Absolutely. It's how you respond.
Right?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So, Tom Hanks was in a movie where they got pirated, hijacked on the ocean. So when this gets made into a movie, who would you like to play you? What actress is?
Angelina Jolie.
There you go. There you go. Love it. Great choice.
Angelina, if you're out there.
Exactly. Call us.
The movie's coming soon to a independent, very small 2-seat theater near you.
Right here in Pittsburgh.
That's awesome. And so, as we kind of close up this, what are some of the things that you wish someone would have shared with you when you were starting out your professional career, your leadership journey? What advice would you like the audience to hear?
Yeah, I think especially, frankly speaking, I'm still fairly young and I've been a leader. I've always had, it's been a lesson and a lifelong journey to understand those fine lines between, sometimes you're, managing people a little older than you. Sometimes they're very young. And we live in a world where people think that, I think employees are family. We're developing all of these words, right? We should be friends. We should get to know. There's a lot of blurred lines. I've had to figure out those boundaries because, yes, you should be empathetic. You should be understanding. At the end of the day, everyone was responsible for something on this team, and you're still the leader. Mm-hmm. And so I think throughout the last 20 plus years, it's defining how do you be friendly and empathetic, but not someone's best friend. I guess those are lessons I've had to learn. And so if I had to give someone any advice, you can be empathetic, you can be understanding, but also EOS teaches this as well. You have to be a good parent. And so almost seeing yourself in that light where you care about somebody, at the end of the day, you're not you're holding their hand and leading them. You're not sitting next to them on the couch, I guess is the analogy that I would give. Maybe that's not a good one, right?
Yeah, we have at my company, our value, EOS, we have our purpose and our values, and it's praise, and the A is accountability, and the E is empathy. And I think those two, we can't have one without the other. And I think that's kind of what we're saying. Like we want to be empathetic, but we can't be all empathetic without the accountability piece, right?
Yeah.
And we don't want to be all accountability without the empathy, because there are some things going on in people's life where you have to have a good mix of both of those. And so that's really what we try to teach, is having both accountability and empathy. And sometimes that scale slides a little bit, but you just have to know how to use both.
Yeah. And I think also understanding there is some kind of structure here, right? We are empowering people within our organizations, within their roles, within their functions, but then we have our own function. And so that function also needs respect. And it probably gets put a little bit more on me because I appear younger, to be frank, and I've been younger than some of the people I've managed. So for me, that's always been kind of a learning curve for me. How do I establish myself? Yes, I'm sometimes going to be the ultimate decision maker. I'm empowering you in your role, but I still am the owner of this company. And so that's lessons that I've had to learn along the way. How do you be a great leader? How do you be empathetic? How do you be caring? And at the same time, still have the understanding that there are some decisions that I'm going to make that you're not going to agree with.
Yeah. So you're still a young leader. What would you tell your 21-year-old self, like that you
have a lot more fun and don't take yourself as seriously?
I love that.
That's a great one.
I tell people, myself that now still.
Absolutely. Like that is a fantastic one, right? Because as you think back through that journey, you've accomplished amazing things and you've had tremendous success and you want to enjoy it. Life is the journey. It's not the destination. And so often as that type A leader, we're so focused on the destination that we don't take any moment to enjoy the journey. So I love that lesson. That's a great one.
So you're an EOS implementer.
Yeah,
so,
thanks to Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what, if somebody is interested in EOS or maybe even using you as an implementer, what would that look like? Give us your kind of why you're unique to help people in that.
Yeah, obviously I think my experience as an entrepreneur building two companies, selling them specifically in the B2C space is, a unique kind of background that I bring to the table. But also, the EOS framework is a great way. Tim and I are always going to teach the same thing, but in our own, way with our own personality. And for anyone that's familiar with the system, it's kind of a fail-proof way to build the operations and strategy side of your business so you can focus on what matters the most, and which is providing a great product or service to your customers. And so, I think when you hire one of us, you're getting someone with experience, that has built a few things that can bring their perspective to the table, right, in the room, and at the same time, hopefully lead your leadership team to make better decisions and to use these processes to help you achieve your goals. And so, I guess that's why someone should hire me if they're interested in EOS and if they're interested in, I think we each have our own personalities and you have to hang out with us for, a couple days every quarter, right, every year and lean on us for advice. And so it's about, do you trust us? Do you trust each of us? Do you trust the relationship? Do you trust the advice that we may give you along the way? And can you open up and be open and honest with us in the room? I think that's the most important thing. So, yeah.
No, I'm excited. I know there are people out there that are listening that are interested in this. I know I run on EOS and I hear stories all the time. We were just talking about earlier, like, does everyone know about EOS? I feel like most people now that I talk to know about, but they're curious and they want to know more. So I think we'll obviously put your contact information in with the podcast.
Hang out with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, and I'd love that.
Yeah, it's been great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pallavi. It was always just so much fun to hang out with you and hear your experience and your stories. Thank you so much for sharing those.
This was fun
with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate the fact that you invest your time in listening to these podcasts, please enter a comment on the podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any topics or stories that you want us to try to tackle, let us know that as well. Thank you so much. And thank you, Josh. Thank you, Pallavi.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
And subscribe below.
Yeah, hit the subscribe. Bash it's what the kids say these days. Bash the button.
Nice.
So thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next time.